Well, welcome everyone. I'm Susan Crane, the president of the Stow Conservation Trust. It is terrific to see all of you and so many good cooks. Thank you all for a delicious dinner. I hope you all enjoyed your dinner. The plans for tonight. I'm going to have a presentation which will include a year in review. And there'll be a period for Q&A afterwards if any of you have any comments. I know this is not a bashful group. And then we're going to have a short business meeting. And then we're going to have a break for dessert. For those of you who have already gotten dessert or want dessert now, that's fine. But we will have a little break between our business meeting and the speaker later on tonight on theirs. So this, the Stow Conservation Trust was founded nearly 50 years ago, and it for the purpose of assisting in and promoting the preservation of the rural and agricultural character of the town of Stow for conservation. At nearly 50 years, we've conserved almost 1,000 acres of land. We have 11 reservations, property that we own, covering 433 acres. We have 21 conservation restrictions covering 536 acres, and our stewardship team maintains about 12 to 15 miles of trails. So what are we doing behind the scenes, taking care of our land? We are very active in stewardship, and I will tell you a lot more about that tonight. We monitor our conservation restrictions to make sure the conservation values of the conservation restriction are upheld. We evaluate and act upon land protection opportunities. We educate the public. We collaborate with our key partners. We have many partners, but our key partners are the town, and particularly the town's Conservation Commission and Sudbury Valley trustees. We participate in fundraising, and I'm sure all of you know that because you've received letters from us, and many, many other activities which we will tell you about. Keeping SCT humming along requires a huge team effort of board members and volunteers. Probably everybody in this room has helped us in some capacity. There are many challenges in the land trust world today, but the three that many focusing on are loss of biodiversity, climate change and its impacts, and accessibility for everyone to natural lands. As I'm sure all of you know, we are in a difficult political period right now with reduced federal funding, and that directly affects available federal and state conservation grants that we rely on to protect our lands. So it's now up to the state and local government and land trusts to take on more of this responsibility. Bob Wilbur, seated over here, our past president, and he just recently retired as the statewide Director of Conservation Services. He helped me with some interesting statistics. We are living in the third most densely populated state in the country. Yet, we're managing to protect a lot of conservation land in the state. A lot more needs to be done, but we've done a lot. Many of you may have heard of what's called 30 by 30, and this is the statewide goal of protecting 30% of the land mass in Massachusetts by 2030. The great news is that Stow is there. We have a lot more work to be done to meet the second goal, which is to protect 40% by 2050. But Bob reminded me this evening of another statistics that I had not heard, and that was a goal of protecting 28% by 2025. And under Bob's leadership for the state, Bob recently retired, but under Bob's leadership, 28.1% of the landmass in Massachusetts have been protected. So thank you, everyone, and thank you, Bob. I skipped ahead. So there is no statewide funding mechanism right now for conservation in Massachusetts. And in fact, statewide funding on the list of funding among the states is very low in the United States. And many of you signed tonight a ballot petition. We need 75,000 signatures to get on the ballot by 2026, so this will be for all voters in Massachusetts, an initiative called Nature for Massachusetts, and that would create a dedicated fund of perhaps $100 million a year without raising any new taxes by dedicating tax revenue from sporting goods services. So it's a wonderful idea. There are 2 pending bills in the State House, one in the House and one in the Senate. And if they don't pass, you'll probably see this on next year's ballot, November 2026. My husband, Mark, was collecting some signatures. Mark's right over here. Could you raise your hand, Mark? Because if you haven't signed and you are a Massachusetts registered voter and you would like to sign, we'd really appreciate your seeing Mark or me at the break, and we'll get you signed up. So I am going to now start with our year in review. Our stewardship crew is just magnificent. They work endless hours keeping our properties in the shape they're in, and we are so lucky to have such an outstanding and dedicated team. We have a volunteer stew crew made up of many, many people, and that is led by board members John San Germano and Bill Warner. Could you two raise your hands? And Tom Porcher works closely with them, too. I mean, a lot of people are involved in stewardship. So we care for our 11 reservations every single year. Someone from the trust goes out to walk the conservation restrictions, the 21 conservation restrictions we hold, to make sure that the conservation values are being upheld. Does anyone want a definition of a conservation restriction? Okay, we've got a really sophisticated crowd here, so I'm going to call them CRs for the rest of the night. The stewardship group maintains an extensive trail network, and they put up the signs and kiosks with information. They're very busy with invasive removal projects. Just some of the invasives we've tackled this year are bittersweet and water chestnut, garlic mustard, Phragmites, knotweed, and I won't name all the rest or we would be here all evening, but we all know what kind of problem they are, not only on our lands, but probably in your yards as well. So the stewardship group does so much. For our monthly board meetings, we get a report from the stewardship leaders, team leaders, and it's several pages long of all of their accomplishments and all of the people who helped them meet these goals. So I would be here all night if I were to list them, and I just want to highlight a couple of projects. First of all, who could tell me where this is? Where is this? Go ahead, call out. Shepherd Memorial Woodlands. This was a really key accomplishment. You've heard about this for the past couple of years, but it is now completed. It is a really special spot. I hope all of you have had an opportunity to go out and visit. It was, of course, named in honor of Tom Shepherd, a founding board member. We had a grand opening of the boardwalks in May, and our very own Nancy Shepherd, raise your hand, Nancy. You could see her with the scissors at the ribbon cutting ceremony. And John San Germano, where are you? John back here. John spearheaded this project, and I wouldn't begin to guess how many hours he put into this over many years. He constructed some of the boardwalk segments himself and with the team. He built a beautiful kiosk out there, and we also now have in place a series of informational plaques, which Janet Moffett, our vice president, created. She worked with the designer and came up with really great informational plaques. How many are there, Janet? 6, 7? Five, okay. They're really fun to see in the woods. Board member Bill Werner, Bill, raise your hand. Bill is very industrious in the woods, and he built a picnic table out of leftover wood from the boardwalk. And we accomplished all of this with almost no funds from the trust. We received numerous grants, and very proud of this accomplishment. So thank you for everyone who was involved in that. Another one of our unique reservations is Leggett Woodland. This one is tucked away, so I hope many of you had a chance to visit it. We have little bronze sculptures, tiny little bronze sculptures on a path that were created by Linda Hoffman. We have a music station where children can come and play music in the woods. And with John Sandramano's leadership again, we have a series of storyboards that read picture by picture as you go through the woods, and it's a rotating story, and this is just one of the many pictures that the kids can see. So it's nice to engage young families who love to come out there with their kids, and we have really, really big trails so that the ticks stay well off on this side, so you can safely visit. This is a before and after slide of a habitat restoration project in Red Acre Woodland, spearheaded by Tom Porcher. Right here, yes, thank you. Just talking to Tom. The right picture, the after, doesn't quite do it justice because it is magnificent with the spring blossoms on the crabapple tree. But this was a crabapple tree grove planted right after World War II that was full of invasives. And with generous help from neighbors, it was restored, and now it is really a beautiful meadow, which you can see when you drive down Red Acre Road. And of course, we wouldn't be a land trust without land protection. We always have many, many irons in the fire and quietly work below the surface with many landowners before the projects are ready for prime time, including several that we're working on right now that are, maybe we can announce them next year. And some projects such as Shepherd Memorial Woodland take literally decades of work to come to fruition. So we are working on that. One project that is ongoing is Stow Acres, which I'm sure all of you know about. This was a very, very big project working with the town of Stow in a joint effort to conserve many, many acres of the South Course and the North Course. Currently, we're working on the ecological restoration of the former driving range, which is going to be turned back into wetlands. And we have federal funds involved in that from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers. And for those of you at town meeting the other night, you know that CPA funds were just allocated to assist with that project. A public access trail system is in process. Some of the trails are already in place, and they're really fun to walk, especially for me along the river. I just love that view across the Assabet River. A public labyrinth is being created, and as soon as weather permits in 2026, the housing component on the North course, is slated to begin construction with infrastructure for roads and then the houses in a dense village-like setting so that most of the land will be conserved. Fundraising. I think it was announced last year that this gift was on the way, but this year we were really lucky to receive a $20,000 bequest from the Eric Russell Trust. Eric and his wife, Carol, were longstanding members of the trust, and when they both passed away, they left this generous legacy gift to SCT, and that goes a long way. $20,000 was a very generous gift. Governance. I chose this slide because I wanted to make sure that the pines were clearly in view here, but governance is a challenge. It always is a challenge in any organization. We have lots of volunteers involved, and we have committee members and board members and volunteers all over Stow and even beyond. Where is Lori Burt? Lori. Burnett. How did I say that? Excuse me. I'm sorry. Lori Burnett. Lori has been instrumental in helping us get organized and into much better functioning committees and moving us into the 21st century in technology. Lori also never lets us lose sight of the important history of our land in Stow and beyond, which once belonged to the indigenous people. So, Lori, thank you so much. And I do know a Lori Burton. I'm so sorry I said that. Okay. Events and education, like what we are doing tonight, and hopefully for those of you who can stay around to hear about the bears, that's one of our educational opportunities. But throughout the year, we hold numerous walks. We speak at land trust conferences and local events. We publish articles. We have a website that many of you have seen, and where is Jeff Ritterson, one of our board members over here? Jeff maintains the website, and we conduct outreach to our members by letters, emails, social media, and we have fun gatherings like this one. So this year, we had the best ever Bike for the Woods, which is our biggest fundraiser. We had 131 riders, and we netted over $3,500. I want to recognize Jim Salvi. Bob, you can't talk to him now because we're recognizing Jim. So Jim led this effort, and I want to give a big round of applause for Jim, and it was a fabulous job. I'm going to mention a few others who were involved because this was a large effort. Some are here, some are not. Melissa Rollins, Angela Zhang, Taylor Clark, Marianne Sharon, John O'Dowd, and board members Janet Moffett, Alan Fierce. Alan, where are you? Alan, and Eve Donahue. Eve, I saw Eve back there. We were given generous donations from many different local businesses who donated food, and we heard year after year that many people come for the cider donuts, which are particularly delicious, and the peaches. And I want you all to see this photo that's very meaningful. Friends of Chris. Many of you knew Chris Spear, who had organized this event for many years and tragically passed away in a bike accident last year. So it's nice to be able to remember him and to think of him for Bike for the Woods. So Marble Hill turned 50 this year, and the town organized a townwide event, and SCT participated in the town's effort to honor this very special property. And Dick Perkins, where are you? Oh, right here next to Nancy. Dick Perkins, I think everybody knows. Dick was one of the founding board members of the trust in 1977. He has continuously served as a board member. Do I have that right, Dick? Since 1977, he has served every year as a board member. He was a past president of SCT, and he gave a really excellent presentation at our celebration event about the history of Marble Hill. So I want to recognize a couple of other people tonight. There are way too many people who have helped in such significant ways to help our organization this past year, but I want to recognize a couple of special people. First is Kathy Sfera. Kathy. So Kathy just retired as the town's conservation director of 13 years. I think you had another title before then, but you ran the conservation office in town, and has been for many, many years, long before she came into this role, a conservation leader in Massachusetts. And she has worked very closely with the Stow Conservation Trust on so many joint land protection projects, and I'm just going to name a few here. Stow Acres, certainly, Carver Hill Orchard and Small Farm, the creation of Minister's Pond Park. And Kathy and Jim together, what year was it when you donated your own conservation restriction on your West Acton Road property to Stow Conservation Trust? 2013 or 14, well, a while ago, and we're grateful. So Kathy said that she took the position as conservation director to make a difference in Stow, and Kathy, you sure did. So we thank you for everything you've done, and we're really glad to hear that you're staying on the Conservation Commission in some capacity. I hope that's not just a rumor. That's great, that's great. And I want to not only thank Kathy, but we do not have, and I don't think we ever have had, an official Couple of the Year award, but if there were one, I would give it to Kathy and Jim, so thank you both. And thank you, Kathy. So on a sad note, we lost Donna Bush this past year. Many knew Donna, who passed away in March, and many of you were here celebrating her life in this very room this spring. Here tonight are John Bush, who was Donna's husband of 63 years, and their daughter Laura. Oh, thank you, John. And next to John is their daughter Laura. When I reached out to John to see if he could be here tonight, and he told me that he was coming from New Hampshire, I didn't tell anyone because I wanted him to be a big surprise for all of us. So we're so glad that you're here, John. John was the president of the Stow Conservation Trust for 16 years until 2017, when he and Donna moved to New Hampshire. And he was the president when I first joined this board. And Donna was involved in everything, and I always thought of her as SCT's first lady. She was a remarkable woman. During the entire time of John's tenure as president, and John now tells me for many years before, she organized this event. So as she was passing the baton, she left lists for her successors about what to do to prepare for this meeting. So I was going through the lists a couple of days ago, and I found this note from Donna. I generally check out the Christmas tree shop in late summer for fall-themed items. And that's really who Donna was. I mean, for those of you who've been here for years, we had fall leaves on the tablecloths and matching napkins and matching cups, and she is very much missed. But thank you, John and Laura, for making the effort to be here tonight. So before I go on to my last slide, I want to, this person needs no introduction, Jane Goodall. She is my personal hero, and I want to play a small clip from a video she left as a message to the world about 6 months before she died. So here it is.
We depend on Mother Nature for clean air, for water, for food, for clothing, for everything. And as we destroy one ecosystem after another, as we create worse climate change, worse loss of diversity, we have to do everything in our power to make the world a better place for the children alive today and for those that will follow. You have it in your power to make a difference. Don't give up. There is a future for you.
So her message is exactly what all of us are doing and why we are here. And it's both a little dark because things are difficult, but it's also very hopeful and promising. And with the support of all of you, we will continue to do great things, and we will do all we can for Stow and beyond. So I thank you for that.
And the one place, SCT runs on volunteers, and they're not just the directors. What I'd like is if anybody who's volunteered in some capacity for SCT in the last year would stand up. Stew crew, writing thank you letters, Jean Henero. So thank you guys. We are a 100% volunteer organization, and the more people we can get involved in the organization, the more we can get done, the more powerful we are, and also the less work some of us have to do. So, here's some current volunteer opportunities. You can Stew Crew, which has been mentioned, maintains the trails, reduces, tackles invasive species. Our goal is to get rid of them, but you know how that works. We have a call out for people to help with the conservation restriction monitoring. So John and Bill do a lot both with the town, SVT, and we could use recruits to walk the boundaries of different properties, make sure that the boundaries haven't been encroached on by abutters, that the people who own the property are following the rules of the conservation restriction. It's a really important job, and with all of the different conservation properties we have, it would be great to get more people involved in that job. Then we are going to try and increase our events. We have a couple people interested in helping with some more activities to get younger people involved and get kids involved with them. So if you'd like to help with that, that would be awesome. And we have a new committee that we're forming for the 50th anniversary committee, because in 2027, SCT will be 50 years old. And the idea behind this committee is both to have people look at the history of SCT, how have we achieved what we've achieved in the past 50 years, and also where are we going? We have preserved this land forever. If you look around the room, many of us are not going to be here. Well, none of us are going to be here forever. Some of us may find forever quicker than others. So we are actively looking into our next 50 years, and how do we take the enthusiasm and the passion from people like Dick and Tom Shepard, who are some of our beginning founders and carry that forward for the next 50 years. So there is a sheet of paper on everybody's table and also at the back table. If you'd like to sign up for one of those committees, please, we encourage you to be a part of it. We can't do what we do without you. So thank you.
We are very fortunate tonight to have Meghan Crawford presenting on coexisting with black bears in Massachusetts. She is an engagement biologist at the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, which we all know of as Mass Wildlife. She's a black bear biologist and will give us tips on how we can take proactive steps to coexist with bears as they expand into our area. And for those of you who are on the social media platform Nextdoor, I'd say about 10% of the postings are about black bear sightings in our town and nearby. She has been at this a while. I found on your LinkedIn that you were a bear study crew volunteer in college. So that's a nice resume. In addition to her background in wildlife management, Meghan has over 10 years of experience teaching natural science at museums, zoos, and environmental education centers across the country. So I want to welcome Meghan. Thank you, Meghan.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thanks so much for having me here. My name is Meghan Crawford, and I am the Community Engagement Biologist at the Massachusetts Division of Fisheries and Wildlife, or known as Mass Wildlife. And tonight, I'm going to be your entertainment for a bit here, hopefully. For the next 30 minutes or so, we're going to talk all about living with black bears. So let's hop right on to it. And I do love to start with just reminding folks who Mass Wildlife is, who I work for. So it sounds like you might be familiar with Mass Wildlife. Give me like a raise a hand or a thumbs up if you've heard of Mass Wildlife before. Super, awesome. Just a reminder, our mission, we are a state agency that is responsible for the conservation of freshwater fish and wildlife across the state. And that includes common and abundant wildlife like black bears, like coyotes, many other things I could list, but it also includes endangered and threatened animals and plants too. And then on top of that, we also work to restore, protect, and manage land for wildlife to thrive and for people to enjoy it. So I'm sure a lot of you in here can kind of connect to that mission. We have over 230,000 acres of land that we oversee, some of which is actively managed to improve that habitat for wildlife and for people's use. And they can be found at wildlife management areas across the state. Raise your hand if you've been to a wildlife management area before, a WMA. Oh, super, love to see that too. Awesome. So that's connected to us too as well. So this is what we're gonna do tonight. We're gonna learn about black bear biology and research. We're gonna review some tips for coexisting with black bears as they move into areas like Stow. That'll be hopefully about 30 minutes, if not less, and then we'll hit it with a Q&A. And then we'll get the signal to wrap it up at some point, I'm sure. So let's start with who we're talking about, what we're talking about. We are talking about the American black bear. So this is the only bear that can be found in the eastern United States. It's the only bear that can be found here in Massachusetts. When we're talking about adult male black bears, we call them boars. They are solitary, live most of their lives on their own, and they're quite large. They average between 350 and 600 pounds. Very large, strong animals. When we're talking about adult female black bears, we call them sows. They're a bit smaller, range between 140 and 300 pounds. 300 would be an exceptionally large female black bear. Usually we find those in suburban areas where they're finding plentiful human-associated food sources is where they're bigger. That does not mean better. We like to see them more in that lower 200s range. And once they hit reproductive age, they are almost always with their young. They're pretty much consistently caring for young once they hit reproductive age, which is around 3 years old. So we're going to start with just talking about black bear diet and habitat usage because that changes throughout the year depending on what is available. And it can also drive black bear behavior and what you may or may not see at any time of the year. So let's imagine ourselves that we're not in the depths of fall and starting to feel this cold weather. Let's put ourselves for a second in springtime. So in spring, black bears, they are looking for that freshly emerging greenery because they are omnivores. So they eat both meat and plant material, but their diet is predominantly plant material, like 90% plants. So they're really looking for skunk cabbage during that springtime is a really important food source for them, which can be found in wetlands. So you can commonly find black bears in wetlands in that early springtime. But then they're looking for other things too, other greenery that's available, leftover nuts from the previous fall, carrion, that's like leftover dead things because they're scavengers. They'll snack on that too. And when they do hunt, they are like lazy hunters. They really don't like to work that hard for their food, which is why scavenging is great. Eating plants is great. They don't run away from you. But they will hunt predominantly during this springtime when deer fawns are starting to become available. They're born starting in like mid-May. The first 2 weeks of their lives, they're pretty not mobile. And so animals take advantage of that, including black bears, but also including bobcats, coyotes. It's just kind of a part of it. That is a pretty easy meal for them. And then human-associated food sources. I'm going to be talking about those a ton tonight. And what I mean by those is those are the foods that we as people provide in our backyards, either on accident or hopefully not on purpose. So big one, bird feeders. And we'll talk a lot about bird feeders this evening. And yeah, you can find them in wetlands. Let's move into summer. We add on to that diet in the summertime by other things that become available. Insect are a big part of their diet. So ants, bees, wasps, mostly their nests or their larvae. So they'll dig into the ground, they'll dig into logs for those things. They'll be looking for fruit, berries, cherries, grapes, absolutely. And they'll be looking at agricultural crops as well. So especially things like corn and apples, which can be a real source of conflict for farmers in Massachusetts that are trying to live alongside these animals, and they're coming in and eating their crops that they rely on. Where you can find them in the summer, still wetlands, but moving more into those upland forest areas, logged areas, and fields and orchards. Then you head into late summer and fall, and this is when bears enter a stage that we call hyperphagia, which is just a fancy way of saying all they want to do is eat, which is pretty much what bears want to do all the time, but it goes into like hyperdrive during this time because what they're thinking is they're packing on the pounds, they're packing on all the fat that they need so that they can make it through the winter time. So what are they eating? Still corn and apples. They're looking at the hard mass that's falling that fall, so all the different nuts that may be on the ground. And they might be looking for deer carcasses as well that might be on roadsides, gut piles that might be out in the field during the hunting season because the deer will get field dressed and those gut piles remain, and animals like black bears will consume those. And then come fall habitats, upland forests and fields and orchards are predominantly where you'll find them. But they got that one-track mind during this time, all about food. And this can be a time where we see a lot of conflict because of that, of bears coming into people's backyards looking for easy meals. And then we head into winter. Raise your hand if you've heard that black bears hibernate during the winter time. Yeah. So I'm not going to use that word hibernate. That's for a pretty good reason, is that black bears are not true hibernators. So they do go into this very restful state during the wintertime. They den during the wintertime to upwards for 5 months where they do not eat, drink, or go to the bathroom. But they're not true hibernators because their body temperature doesn't drop significantly enough, and they can wake up. They're like just in a solid little nap. If they hear something, they can wake up, which a true hibernator cannot do. But they do enter this really, really restful state. And this adaptation is primarily due to food shortages. So that's what's going to be that trigger for bears to enter their den, is when food becomes less available. It's not so weather dependent. Weather does play a slight factor in triggering them to go into their dens. But it's not that a black bear can't survive Massachusetts winters. They're covered in fat. They have very, very thick fur. That's not what it's about. It's more about the food, not so much about like, are they going to be cold or not in Massachusetts. So some bears, because of that, will not den. They will skip denning if there are food sources remaining available. So if people continue to have bird feeders out, if they have chickens or livestock that are unprotected in their backyard, they have available compost and trash in their yards, some bears will choose not to den because they did not get that trigger to enter the den because food remained available. However, pregnant bears will always enter their den because that's where they give birth. And so they have other reasons to tuck in for a bit. So we're going to talk a little bit about this because black bear biology and behavior is really centered around their reproductive cycle, and specifically the female black bear reproductive cycle. And so we're going to focus on her for a bit, our lovely sow. So let's imagine ourselves again in mid-May to early July. That is black bear mating season. Males and females come together to mate during this time, peaks in like late June. During this time, the eggs are fertilized. They develop a little bit, but black bears have something called delayed implantation. It's very neat, where these eggs are fertilized, they develop a bit, but then they pause. They do not implant into the uterus at that time. They just freeze in time. Delayed implantation. Then the sow just goes on her merry way. She heads into the summer, into fall. She's in that hyperphagia state. They're eating as much as they can possibly can, packing on the calories, all on her own. Then come November 1, she enters the den. That is when that fetal development begins again. So again, that delayed implantation, it was delayed for months, and now it begins again, and the fetal development occurs. Come mid-January to early February, that sow will give birth to cubs in her den. They are pretty immobile at that time, but they're utilizing the sow's milk, and they're staying in the den together until about April 1, where they exit the den, looking a little bit like this, little rascals. Then from April to October, that sow is solely focused on raising those cubs. So you'll notice that's actually the start of year 2, which is why this is turned green. And you'll see she goes from April to October. She does not participate in that year's breeding season. She can't handle another group of cubs right now. She's already got some. So she's focused on those. So she skips that breeding season, just raises the cubs she had in the den. Come November, her and those cubs will enter the den together. And at that point, those cubs are called yearlings because they are just about a year old. And so that sow and her yearlings will enter the den together. A little bit more variable in that time frame, so November to December, so that's occurring right about now. Oh, today is November 1. How cool. I don't think I've done a presentation on November 1, because it is really like on the money. Like they're wicked, like between either like yesterday and today, they really like hit the den that day. Ooh, that's cool. Okay, I'll check that off my bucket list that I didn't even know I had. Okay, where were we? November to December, those sow and yearlings enter the den. They stay in that den together until about mid-February to mid-March, so they're also exiting earlier than they did before. Those yearlings may stick around mom for a little bit longer to get just those last-minute lessons on how to be a successful adult bear, but then come May, that sow's going, all right, I've taken care of you for like over 15 months, you gotta go. I've taught you everything that you need to know, you gotta go. And so the young get kind of chased off, they disperse, and that sow is by herself again, and she enters the breeding season once more, and this whole cycle begins again. Pretty cool stuff, and it can explain a lot of what you might see if you happen to see a bear in your neighborhood. So this is our current black bear range here in Massachusetts, but let's imagine ourselves, I'm like having us time travel a ton tonight, let's imagine ourselves pre-colonization. We're in many, many moons ago. Pre-colonization, this entire state was fully forested, and black bears were found across the state. But then when European colonizers came here, there was a lot of land conversion from forest into agricultural fields, and there was also incentivized killing of black bears during that time due to concern for livestock and concern for safety of family and like livelihood. Now, for black bears, they were not completely eliminated from the state like wolves and mountain lions were. Instead, they just had this very, very small remnant population that persisted out in the northwestern portion of the state in the Berkshires. So teeny, teeny, tiny population just kind of shrunk down over there. But thanks to regulations, thanks to conservation efforts, mass wildlife existing, we now have our black bear population has rebounded to this point. So the slate blue is what we call our established bear range, where bears are common and abundant. They're reproducing in those areas, obviously western Massachusetts into central Massachusetts. And then we have this tan expanding range here, which means that bears are seen in these places. It's not a surprise to see them there. You just might not have reproducing individuals or many reproducing individuals in those areas. Now, this doesn't mean that no bears can be found in these areas. I'm sure you've heard of some sightings of bears that are close to Boston or down in Southeast Mass. They certainly occur. Usually those are young male bears that are like really dispersing, kind of trying to get out of Dodge and really find their own spot. They make silly decisions because they're like teenage bears, and they end up in places out here. But we know our bear population is growing in size and expanding eastward, and you can see that with this map here. And that's, hopefully I labeled Stow correctly. I'm still learning my states in this or my towns in this little region, but you can see Stow is nice and situated in this expanding bear range here. So how do we know that our bear population is growing in size and expanding eastward? That's something that Mass Wildlife we monitor and something that we manage for. And so there's a couple ways that we know this. One is by the calls that we get about bears. And I say we kind of largely here because these are actually calls that went into the Massachusetts Environmental Police, or the MEP, which is technically a different group than Mass Wildlife, but we do collaborate closely. And they have a 24/7 dispatch line, and they receive a lot of calls about bears. So this is a 5-year span of their bear calls. Anything in blue is in blue cooler colors is less calls. Anything in red or like warmer colors is more calls. So Stow did you guys are independent. You didn't need any calls about bears during this time frame. But you can see that there are clearly bear sightings happening across the state. And I'll mention here, right, these are likely calls generated by 1, maybe 2 bears during that time frame. It's just a really novel thing for those folks. So a lot of people were seeing a bear and it generated many, many calls. Doesn't mean that there was many bears in those areas. Another way that we learn about our black bear population is through our collaring study. So Massachusetts has one of the longest running black bear projects in the country. It's over 40 years old. So we've been continuously monitoring our population since 1980, which is really impressive. And through that time, we have looked at adult female survival rates, their causes of mortality, so things that have killed adult black bears, and cub production and survival. And so for this collaring study, we have black bears with collars on them that look like this. And I can just pass this around if people want to just pass around. Just know it's heavier than it looks. You can take a look. This has been on a very real black bear. There's scratches on it, not from the bear trying to get the collar off. It's because the bear's out in the woods and it gets scratched up, climbing trees and going through brush. But you can pass around. Just try not to get any like food on it if you can do me a favor. But and make sure it finds its way back to me. But those track location, and we'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. But let's first start by thinking about how do you get a collar on a black bear? So that starts in the springtime. We set out big barrel traps that have a bait in the back, and the bear enters the trap, interacts with the bait, door closes behind them. These traps are monitored closely by our biologists that set them, and once they see that it's closed, they go on out there, they immobilize the bear, they do an overall health check of that bear. If it is a female and we need to add an individual female to our study in that area, then she may get a collar at that time. We are not putting collars on males at this time typically. So at any given time, we have about 40 female black bears with collars on them. About half of them have GPS capabilities that actually can give us location every 45 minutes, which is an enormous amount of data to get about those animals. And actually that's funded, those collars in particular are funded by the Massachusetts Department of Transportation, MassDOT, and we'll talk about why that is in a little bit. But the other collars are just kind of basic, what we call VHF collars, that you have to actually go out and receive the signal in order to locate that animal. So you can't like sit at your desk and know where it is. But every winter, between February and March, our biologists will visit all of the collared bears in their dens. So, what does a bear den look like? It can look like a lot of things. It can be a rock cave, but it's not as often a rock cave as cartoons want you to think that it is. It is almost never a rock cave, but here's some photo evidence of one being a rock cave in mass. More often than not, they're like just brush piles on the ground. They're underneath fallen logs. They're underneath stumps or like root balls. They can be up in trees. So they can be really diverse. Sometimes bears will just make like a bird's nest on the ground, basically. They'll just like scoop things together, curl up like just in the elements, and that's their den. And again, remember the bears, they can handle the winter temps. They can just be exposed to the elements perfectly fine. It's again, denning because of the food availability, not their physical ability to survive those temps. But when our biologists do go out to those dens, they have to be very quiet because remember, bears can wake up. They're not true hibernators. So even if like the snow is too crunchy, the bears could hear it, alert, look out their den, see a group of people coming toward their den, and bust out and run. And that's not what we want to see because we want to be able to get our hands on each bear each winter, ideally. I feel like there was something else I wanted to mention about this. They are, the adult female is immobilized during these den checks, chemically immobilized. And that's obviously for the safety of her and for the safety of our staff. And that is done by highly trained individuals. And a lot of care is taken when doing that, of course, to make sure that her airways are good and her body temp remains good. We put her on a tarp to make sure that she's not directly on the cold or wet ground. And why we visit them during the winter time, one is to check on the collar, make sure it's not uncomfortable on her, if it needs to be replaced because it's had a lot of wear and tear. We do an overall health assessment for her, which does include weighing her. So you might wonder, what do you do? How do you weigh a adult female black bear? With some very scientific technology here, folks. A net, that's all brought together onto a carabiner there in the middle. And then they find a very nice sturdy branch that they attach a scale to and then hook that to the carabiner. And she's lightly lifted on up. And our technician reads the weight. She was 275. So on that upper scale there. And then she's just gently put down onto that tarp. So we collect health information during this time and just make sure that that collar's looking good. But if she gave birth to cubs in that den, then we're also there for that too. Well, we're there to check on those cubs because one data point that we get from this collaring study is cub production and survival. So we check on them, and if there are cubs, we count them, we sex them. At this point, we don't go in there when the cubs are too young. At this point, they're at least 4 weeks, if not 6 weeks old. They do not need to be chemically immobilized. They're just like little Tasmanian devils. So you just got to keep a hand on them, make sure they remain warm. We put them in our jackets to keep them warm, but we do count them, sex them, and weigh them. Again, with very highly scientific technology over here. That is a winter hat that has been outfitted to be used as a sort of little sack there. This 6 weeks-ish, and he slunks on in. Yeah. Yeah, so it can be anywhere between 1 to 4 cubs typically, on average 2 to 3. And that is a part of the data that we're collecting when we go out. So we can get into that too. That cub was about 4 pounds, and I just like to point this out. They're born with very nice long claws because their best defense when they come out of these dens is to climb a tree. So that's the first thing they got to do. So they have the claws to do it almost right away. Now, imagine we go back to that same den the next year, then she will have then denned with those cubs that are now yearlings. And so say she had 3 cubs when we visited her last year, and then we visit her this year and she has 2 yearlings. That means 2 out of the 3 survive that first year. That's the additional information we get. Now, at this point, when we visit dens with yearlings, all of them do have to be immobilized because they're basically a large bear at that point. They all get blue ear tags. So if you see a bear with blue ear tags, it means that they've been handled as a part of our research study at some point. Those tags do not track location. They just have a unique identifying number on them that allows us to identify them if they're located somewhere down the road many, many years from now. We can say, oh, it was born this year, and we can get an age. And then any female yearlings, we may consider adding an expandable collar onto her to add her to the study. The reason why it's expandable is because she's still growing quite a bit. So we want that collar, again, to be comfortable for her as she does that. So what do we learn from this study? I know I've mentioned a lot of this. One important thing that we know is we learn about adult female survival rate, and we have a very high adult female survival rate here for black bears. Not that that's any different from our neighboring states, but that is the biggest impact on the population. That is the biggest indicator of whether your population is growing in size, remaining the same, or decreasing, is that adult female survival rate. And we have a high adult female survival rate, so we know our population is growing in size. We learn about age at first reproduction, which on average is now about 3 years old. We learn about average litter size, which, like I said, ranges from 1 to 4, but on average is 2 to 3. And we know that first-time moms tend to have smaller litters than her subsequent litters. So when she's younger, maybe her body condition is lower, or she just physically is smaller, she typically has less cubs. And then cub survival. Again, same thing, that first litter for a sow might have lower cub survival than subsequent litters because she's still learning how to be a mom. So it's a little bit of trial and error there. This is also, these photos were taken on the same day, so presumably really close in age for these cubs. This was a first-time mom that just had one cub that was at this stage of development. This was a well-seasoned mom with these cubs are the same age as this one. She had 2 of them that were as chonkin and full as these. So it just shows you the type of change that can occur. And then we also learned about causes of mortality. So what may cause an adult female or male black bear to die? There are many causes of mortality for bears. Could be vehicle collisions, could be a part of the regulated hunting season, could be a situation where it was a nuisance kill due to the bear actively causing damage to someone's property, but we learn about that through this study too. And then some applications of this information. So I mentioned the Massachusetts Department of Transportation funds part of this project, funds those GPS collars. And that's because roads do have an impact on wildlife, and this is an opportunity for us to learn more about that. And so they were able to actually utilize this data. We had a UMass graduate student, I believe, utilized the data to determine how bears move across the Massachusetts landscape by determining what's the easiest way for them to get from point A to point B, or what we would call the least cost path, which the easiest way. And these darker green lines here are where the most likely path or the easiest path is for a bear to move across the Massachusetts landscape with both the natural features and the human developed features. And so Mass DOT can use this to determine, okay, if this is where a bear is most likely to cross, then probably that's where other wildlife is most likely to cross too. So maybe if we're doing construction in that particular area, we could build in a culvert that's big enough for a bear to go underneath the road when it needs to cross instead of going across the road. And that's great for wildlife health, habitat connectivity, but also great for people and reducing road impacts on wildlife and vehicle collisions for people. So great application of the data. Another piece too is the data was used in a study to determine areas that will likely have substantial future use by black bears. And so they use this to identify locations. And so that's what's identified here in these yellow circles, which one of these circles, if we were to zoom in on it, has Stow right in the middle there. Imagine that. So just to give you some reference here, from the side here is I-90, I-190, and then over here we go on over to the Assabet River National Wildlife Refuge. So yeah, Stow's right on in there. So that means that this area has a high likelihood of having future black bear use. And it does probably currently have black bear use, but we're talking about substantial use in the future. And then I just want to show you some of this data. So if we were to hop on over to the Quabbin here, you have Amherst and UMass Amherst down here, so really developed spaces, but also very green spaces. I'm going to overlay some of our bear study data on this. So each of these colors represent a bear with a collar on it. So you can see like these color clusters here. Each is a collared bear. Each point represents just some location point that came off the collar. And so you can kind of imagine these are their relative home ranges here. So many, many bears in this area, obviously. But it also just shows like, yes, the bears are using green spaces, absolutely, but they're also utilizing very, very developed spaces too. You can barely even see Northampton over there. But that's like, we have bears that are utilizing the areas around UMass Amherst campus. So just shows bears are in close proximity to people every day. And so we're managing for that too. I think that's good enough for that, but it's pretty cool to see that. So this is our goal for managing black bears, and it involves having a healthy bear population that is feeding on natural food sources, utilizing natural areas, and living as compatibly as possible with people. Yeah, I can, if anybody wants. Beautiful. I'll take it back and, cool, thank you. So this is our goal, but shockingly, we cannot achieve this without you, right? I can come and do these presentations and I can say, I swear this is what we want to do, but it really is the everyday decisions that people make when they're living alongside wildlife, when they're living alongside bears, that is going to make the difference. That's going to make it whether we can achieve this goal of living compatibly with bears, them having a healthy bear population with us, but feeding on natural food sources, using natural spaces. It's up to each of us as individuals, really. So I'm enlisting your help here. So we're going to talk just for the remainder about coexisting with bears. Maybe raise your hand if you've seen a black bear in Massachusetts. Okay, sweet. I'd say that's half the room. How about if you've seen a black bear in Stow? Okay, so a couple. Gotcha. So this is the reminder of what drives bear behavior. It is all about food. That's all they're thinking about. One-track mind. People call me, they go, why is a bear in my backyard? And I go, food, click. No, just kidding. But that is true. If we're just boiling it down to one word, it's true. And that is true all year round. All year round, they will take advantage of food. So this is the root cause of bear conflict. So for us to address this conflict, for us to solve this conflict, we need to address that root cause, food. First, bird feeders. So this was taken in Lincoln, Mass. About a year ago, I think. Yeah, last May 2024. These folks definitely weren't used to living alongside bears yet. But obviously, bears are attracted to people's yards, first and foremost, by bird feeders. Although it's charming, but it's not great. They are the number one food attractant for bears around homes. They train bears to come into people's backyards to look for food. It's sort of like a gateway to other issues. There is no safe time of year or day to have bird feeders out. So I have conversations with people almost every day and they go, don't worry, I take them in at night. Every photo I have of a bear at a bird feeder is during the day. Sun is shining, bear is out. They do not care. It's like putting a chocolate cake out there and not expecting like a child to eat it. It is a high calorie, easy meal. That's what they're going for, and that's what a bird feeder is. And it is not good for them to find these types of meals in our backyard. They drive conflict and they harm bears, truly. So I know people have bird feeders out there because they want to support their local birds, and I love that. I relate to that. There's just other better ways to do it that do not cause conflict. One being to plant native plants, shrubs, trees whenever you can. Maintain a clean bird bath is an option during the warmer months. That is much better for wildlife populations as a whole. And we're going to talk a little bit more about this bear because she started at bird feeders. She learned to visit bird feeders by her mom, and we know that because her mom was a part of our study. We had a collar on her, and she was regularly visiting people's houses on their porches, getting bird feeders, and then she had cubs, and she taught them to do the exact same thing. And then when that cub became a yearling and dispersed, this was her. And she immediately was going for bird feeders on people's porches. And so we'll talk a little bit more about where that led her. But the next thing I want to talk about is securing garbage. This is another major source of conflict between people and bears, and not even conflict, but it's what draws them into people's backyards. So just take simple steps to secure your garbage. Put your bins in a garage or shed if you have that available. We have caddy designs online like this. If you do not have an outbuilding that you can put your garbage in, put it on the curb the night or the morning of instead of the night before, and always have your trash in cans, not just on a bag, because they'll just tear into it. Simple things. We have this website, mass.gov/bears, that has a lot of information about bears, including those caddy designs. This is the next growing source of conflict between bears and people. This is a chicken coop in New Braintree. Bears can very easily get into chicken coops that look just like this. This evening, this bear did not get into it successfully, but about a month later it did. So the only way to protect your chickens and other small livestock from bear damage is using electric fencing. Well installed, appropriately installed, and maintained electric fencing that is designed to keep bears out. We have an electric fencing guide online that you can check out. Again, mass.gov/bears. This bear did get into this chicken coop, no problem, and walked away with chickens. We have like action photos of it. I just spared you the gory ones, but not ideal. So, electric fencing. Now, these are the same bears. Like I said, her mom taught her to visit porches and homes for bird feeders, which she then did when she went out on her own, and then she immediately started raiding chicken coops. It was like she found bird feeders in the backyard, and then she looked to the neighbor and go, oh, there's chickens over there. So she went for the chickens. We were getting many calls about her in the South Hadley, Granby area, and we were sort of monitoring that situation. And then later down the line, we got a mortality signal from her collar, because she had a collar on from our study as well. We went out to go check it out, and it had been cut off and thrown in a river. And that was likely done by someone who you could call it a nuisance kill. It is legal under Chapter 131, Section 37, for someone to kill a black bear that is in the act of causing damage, under some other sort of considerations too, so don't take that as black and white. But that person probably didn't know that there was a legal mechanism for that, and so they killed that bear as it was in the act of causing damage to their chicken coops, saw the collar, panicked, cut it off, threw it in a river. Now, you might be thinking poorly of that person at this time, but really, I challenge you to think about where that started. And that started with these harmless bird feeders. The reason that animal met that demise was because of the bird feeders that it learned those initial behaviors from, and that its mom learned those behaviors from. So people love to say that those bird feeders are harmless. This is a really good example of how they are not. And it breaks my heart to kind of see how that comes about, and that's not a unique situation at all. So please, electric fencing guide at mass.gov/bears. It's a great resource. So what do I do if I see black bear in my yard or neighborhood? Reminder, their presence is not an immediate threat. They are pretty chill animals. They generally keep to themselves. But don't go outside. Just let that bear kind of go on its way. Once it's exited the area, please check your property to make sure that you don't have anything out there that's attracting them there in the first place. Remember, first thing to think about, food. Is there food out there that brought this animal in? What do you do if you see a bear while you're on a hike? First off, that's awesome. That's a super cool sighting, not something you'd do every day. But typical trail noise will alert a bear to your presence, and usually they smell you, they see you, they hear you way before you even saw them. But if you do happen to see them, super, keep your distance, keep your pet's leash, don't allow your dog to chase the bear up a tree or anything, not a great idea. And just calmly leave the area. You can use a nice dominant voice if you need to. Say, hey bear, I'm over here, I'm walking this way, have a good day. Whatever it means, just to make it aware your presence is perfectly fine. But just staying calm, not running away, just leaving the area. We have lots of great resources online. I have a ton of printed resources in my backpack that I'm just remembering that I have now that are all this stuff about like, what do you do if you're camping near bears, or what are some top tips for coexisting with bears, some more stuff on the biology of bears that you might enjoy. But these are just the final reminders, is that the more time bears spend around people, the greater chance of a negative encounter, right? And really, bears are not going to change. They have that one-track mind, looking for food, and we as people are the ones that need to change in order to coexist with them, to make sure that we're not setting them up for situations like this, and instead helping reach that goal of having that healthy bear population relying on natural food sources and natural spaces and living as compatibly as possible with us. Looks pretty nice. So these are just the reminders of who to contact if you have any other bear questions or concerns. If you have an immediate question, concern that's outside of business hours, always contact the Massachusetts Environmental Police dispatch line. Your office is technically the Northeast District office, which is out of Ayer. You're like right on the line between the Northeast office and our central office. So you could call either, but this is their line if you want to reach them during normal business hours. And then I work out of headquarters in Westboro. You can always give us a ring if you have any questions about wildlife too. But that is the end of my presentation. And thank you so much for your time, and I'll take any questions you may have.